Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Design Incubation Colloquium 12.3. My name is Dan Wong. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of Design Incubation, an organization focused on research and communication design. I just wanted to give you a few updates about the organization, and then I will allow my colleagues to take over the show. Some upcoming events, we haven't announced them yet, but they should be announced hopefully in the next week or two. We'll be doing a call for abstracts. First for the annual CAA conference, which is going to be in early February this year in New York. I've heard rumors that the conferences are going to be in New York every year moving forward. I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's the rumor. So we are just waiting to hear from them about confirmation of our session, and then we'll be doing a call for proposal. And then at the same time, we are going to have a live or in-person colloquium at the University of Connecticut in February. I believe it's February 26th. That's going to be hosted by Professor Ting Zhu in the Department of Digital Media and Design. So if people are interested in presenting in-person events are really, really special because you get to meet other people and there's some networking and it's just a lot of fun. We don't do them frequently enough, but so we're really looking forward to that one. So we should be announcing that as soon as we also announce the call for proposal for CAA. What else do we have coming up? The annual Design Incubation Awards will be this year again. I believe we do call for entries the beginning of September. The deadline is the end of December. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues, Kat and Dina. Take it away.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. My name is Kat Normoyle and I'm the Director of Peer Review at Design Incubation, where I support the development of the review of scholarly work. I work closely with the authors and presenters and the reviewers to facilitate the peer review process. Our goal is to help advance design research and academic inquiry through peer-reviewed work. I'm also an associate professor at East Carolina University, and I'll be co-moderating the session today with special guest Dina Benbrahim. Thank you so much for being here. Dina is a Moroccan designer and educator and scholar whose work centers Pan-African feminist design histories in North Africa and the pursuit of more equitable futures. She is an associate professor of graphic design at the University of Connecticut and the director of the Design Center in the Art and Art History Department. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Today's program features work from practicing designers, graduate students, adjunct and tenure-track faculty, and distinguished professors. Together, they represent a wide range of perspectives, experiences, and stages of practice. This year, we also introduced a new graduate opportunity. We opened a graduate panel and accepted submissions and got a lot of responses. We're excited to showcase these emerging scholars alongside the rest of today's presenters today. Our program is organized into two sessions around shared areas of inquiry. The first session is called Design, Identity, and Social Contexts. The second session is called Design Pedagogy, Process, and Systems. Each speaker will have about 6 minutes to introduce themselves and their work. We'll hear all of our presentations first, and then we'll open the floor up to discussion afterwards. So presentations will take about 25 minutes, and then we'll have a 20-minute moderated discussion. To give everyone equal time, we ask that you hold those questions until the moderated discussion. And if any questions come along while we're talking, please feel free to write them in the chat as we're going along, and then we'll scroll back to make sure that we get to those questions. Also a good way to remember them while we're having the presentation time.
There is also a Q&A section if you would like to add your questions there, not necessarily in the chat. So that's another option.
Yes, during the moderated discussion, we will have a few questions just to get us going. Dina is going to lead our moderated discussions. And then, yes, we'll have lots of time for open questions as well. Let's see. Any other housekeeping before we begin? We're very excited about our speakers that we have today. And so we are excited to hear about what kind of questions you have as well as our attendees. And so without further ado, we'll get started. We'll begin with session 1, Design, Identity, and Social Contexts. This session explores how design engages with identity, lived experience, and social contexts. Together, these projects examine how design can foster care, representation, and belonging while responding to complex cultural, political, and community-based issues. Please join me in welcoming our speakers. Holly Strickland, Assistant Professor, Middle Tennessee State University. Shreyas Krishnan, Assistant Professor at Washington University in St. Louis. Narges Sedaga, MFA Candidate of Graphic Design at East Carolina University. And Hannah G., MFA Candidate, Master of Design at University of Arkansas. Thank you so much for being here, presenters. Holly, if you'd like to kick us off.
You got it. Okay. Oh, of course, I forgot to hit share screen. Here we go. Alrighty. Okay, can we see my screen? Okay, perfect. All right, so hello, my name is Holly Strickland. As Kat said, I am an assistant professor at Middle Tennessee State University in interactive and graphic design. I'm going on my 3rd year. Today I'll be talking about my ongoing project Care Stories, which is a participant-driven storytelling platform where women contribute their own reproductive health stories and benefit from the stories of others. Okay, so women's health has been disregarded and continues to be disregarded throughout history and current day. In ancient times, there was a wandering womb theory that dismissed women's ailments entirely. In 1977, the FDA banned women of childbearing age from participating in medical research. This was reversed in 93. However, studies show that women are still underrepresented in a lot of medical research. In 2022, the Dobbs decision proved that misinformation about women's health continues to even reshape law in the United States, removing abortion rights from women across the United States. After my secondary research looking into women's health, I wanted to investigate how design could improve women's reproductive health outcomes. I employed a feminist participatory action research methodology. Feminist participatory action research methodology includes action research, which the researcher works alongside participants to address a problem, as well as includes participatory research, in which participants themselves become co-directors of the study, equalizing the power balance between researcher and researchees. So in my methodology, I use the method of consciousness raising groups, which is a historically feminist method that was started during the Civil War. So my consciousness raising groups were comprised of about 11 women, including me, aged 21 to 35. And I started with an opening prompt and asked participants to recall any confusing or perplexing statements or happenings about their own health or about women's health in general in their day-to-day lives. In my consciousness raising group, these conversations unfolded and a pattern emerged through these conversations when participants shared stories that involved not only their health inquiries, but their identities, and they aligned with other members of the group. The impact of the stories was enhanced. So typically, research and interventions work more sequentially. So findings are gathered, then a solution is designed. I found, though, that the consciousness raising group didn't quite follow this formula. As participants shared their story, they were simultaneously like educating one another, destigmatizing these health topics, and fostering camaraderie within the group. So because of that, I found that the consciousness raising group was not only functioning as my research method, but almost as an intervention as well. So based on what I learned from those consciousness raising groups, I created care stories. So in care stories, I wanted to replicate this duality of the consciousness raising group, but in a website platform so it would reach a broader audience. And currently, care stories is in its third story collection cycle, which has been approved by MTSU's IRB office. So to design care stories, I transcribed and coded the consciousness raising group conversations to try to find reoccurring themes. From this analysis, I found that the platform should not focus just on women's health, but more specifically women's reproductive health. So these are some images that kind of represent the topics that we focus on. So before contributing a story, users will come to have to agree to a consent form. So the survey, which is a Google form, opens up with some identity questions such as like ethnicity, age, sexuality, region where you live. And this helps us kind of include those in the postings on the website so people who come to the website can kind of pinpoint stories they might relate to better. So this survey and consent form was approved by MTSU's IRB form, as I was saying, and all stories will be anonymized. So no direct identifiers are included, just some of these direct ones such as like ethnicity and age. So the story contributions are gathered carefully. I wanted to create questions that did not have women coming to the website to speculate or self-diagnose or get health anxiety, like when you go to WebMD and all of a sudden, you've got anxiety the rest of the week. So through carefully constructed surveys, questions, I wanted to elicit reflection on your day-to-day experience with these health events, and also not encourage symptom sharing or self-diagnosis, but more a reflection and kind of talk about the impact of your day-to-day life, etc. So Care Story preserves the duality of the consciousness raising group. As women contribute stories, they continue to build this archive, and as they read existing stories, they can benefit from it. Simultaneously, me, the researcher, analyzes these submissions to develop a deeper understanding of women's health experiences. So this is Care Stories. I just did like a little bit of a brand refresh recently. So this is what the website homepage looks like currently. And from the homepage, you can go into the story index, and these are our reproductive health topics. And from here, you can pick one of these topics to read stories about. So for example, if you chose birth control, you would then come to this page that hosts all of the birth control stories that have been submitted and the consent form was accepted. So from here, you can see that they have like the identity factors, age, and a snippet of the story. I've been going back and forth with the search feature that's still kind of in the works, but you can search keywords such as like Nexplanon or maybe PCOS, and it will filter through the stories. And you can also see the identity factors here as well. So this is an example of an individual story page. So this kind of aligns with all the questions, and we get to read the story of the participant. So this talks about her experience with a contraceptive, and she doesn't really focus necessarily too much on her symptoms, but about what she wished she had known before she started her contraceptive and afterwards, and just how it affected her day-to-day life and good and bad experiences with it. So currently for the third cycle, I launched an Instagram page for Care Stories, and this is my first and only post so far, but this invites people to come and either scan the contribution form, QR code, or the Care Stories website, the QR code. So I would encourage you guys, if you have a story to share or just want to learn more about Care Stories, to yes, join in here and scan either of these codes. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. As you've heard, Holly's platform is built on the premise that shared identity deepens the impact of a story, and that who tells it and who recognizes themselves in it changes what the story can do. Shreya's Krishnan's work takes that question into the archive, into print materials produced by South Asian feminist and queer communities in the 1980s and 90s in Britain, asking how visual identity was constructed, circulated, and claimed across overlapping solidarities. Go ahead, Shreyas.
Thanks, Dina. Just to confirm, you can see my screen, yes?
We do.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. I'm Shreyas R. Krishnan. I'm an illustrator and an assistant professor at WashU's Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts. I'm sharing early research into print material produced by British South Asian feminist and queer groups in the UK in the 1980s and 90s. My starting point was this display of periodicals that I spotted at the Feminist Library in London. Mukti means liberation in many South Asian languages. With the name and the cover illustration, it was obvious to me that this was made for South Asian women. But seen next to We Are Here, Black feminist newsletter, which carried the same illustration, I became less sure of the South Asian-ness of it. Complicating things was the other issue of Black feminist newsletter with an illustration that looked like the Hindu deity Kali. Why did these illustrations that read as South Asian to me appear on newsletters for Black women? And why did they repeat across publications by different groups? In the 1970s and 80s, immigrants from former British colonies organized themselves as being politically Black. This framework for solidarity was based on the shared root of their oppression. While British South Asians were an integral part of politically Black spaces, they realized that a focus on their South Asian identity was needed to dismantle the structural violence they faced from within their communities. This context was important to my research methodology since much of the print material from South Asian movements in Britain is archived under or as Black movements. It's also a useful lens to understand the dual purposes of the illustrations I found, to signal South Asian-ness to other South Asians within South Asian spaces, and to signal South Asian-ness as being part of politically Black spaces. In my preliminary taxonomy, I identify 5 categories of illustrations and how they signaled cultural identity. The first is decorative borders. These are decorative strips of patterns that act as a frame, as a separator, and sometimes to fill space. They often reflected regional motifs, but not always. The borders here echo patterns from Bengali visual culture, speaking directly to the large Bangladeshi demographic of the borough that they were distributed in. Aimed at South Asian, Turkish, and Iranian women, this pamphlet's borders derive from the shared vocabulary of Persian and Mughal artworks. The border illustrations I saw, all uncredited, left me with unanswered questions. Who drew them? Where did they learn these designs? The second type is South Asian art forms. This category relies on textile, mural, and other visual art traditions. Their use directly points at the different parts of South Asia that these communities migrated to Britain from. Queer groups in particular embrace South Asian art forms, making images of queerness that seem to be part of the subcontinent's existing visual history. Their approach to these illustrations infused new queer meaning to these traditional art forms. I connected some of these illustrations with specific projects. Shakti Khabar was the newsletter of Shakti, a South Asian lesbian and gay network. Shakti means power, Khabar means news or information. In multiple issues of Shakti Khabar, I found that they remixed Mughal miniature illustrations to depict scenes of queer South Asian longing and desire. They also used architectural elements to culturally and geographically situate illustrations of queer couples. This was another illustration that I associated mainly with one group. All signs here point to the Hindu deity Kali, who has been used as a contemporary symbol of women's empowerment even outside of South Asian contexts. This version, resembling a textile woodblock print, I found only with materials from Black feminist and queer groups. The third type of illustrations, people and figures. Mukti was a South Asian feminist magazine published by the Mukti Collective. While many of Mukti's covers depicted South Asian women and children, the most recognizable one is the girl who appeared on the cover of issue 1. She appeared in nearly every issue of Mukti and on most promotional material for the magazine, becoming a symbol for British South Asian feminism. Even in crowds, I found it easy to spot the South Asians. These illustrations were specific. People were drawn with care, from faces to hairstyle to clothing. Illustrations in Mukti showed South Asian women of different ages from different parts of the subcontinent doing different kinds of labor. We also see the specific kinds of sexism and racism that they encountered in Britain. Shakti Khabar offered illustrations of contemporary queer South Asian men, showing them in dhotis and kurtas. The fourth category is clothing and accessories as synecdoches, parts that represent the whole. Without the bangles, I would not have seen this cover illustration for Mukti and thought, that's South Asian. Shakti Khabar's illustration of two gay South Asian men holding hands works the same way because it turns the male gender symbol into a pair of interlocking bangles. Organization logos denoted South Asian women through bindis, jewelry, saris, salwar kameez, hair covering, braids, and center-parted hair. Groups for Asian women or Black women created similar visual shorthands to connote their intersectional feminist solidarities. In this illustration in Mukti, we don't see the South Asian woman, but we know she is there just from the bangles on her hand and the dupatta or sari sticking out of the vehicle. My fifth and smallest category is symbolic animals. Mostly, this was a strategy used by Shakti. The Indian peacock is native to the subcontinent and appears in various South Asian art forms. Shakti co-opted illustrations of the peacock both as a symbol of South Asian queerness and as an alternative to patriarchal heteronormative South Asian masculinity. My goal with this preliminary taxonomy is to create a basic structure to organize the works that I've gathered so far. Will most likely evolve as the research progresses. So I'm quite open to suggestions that you may have on the categories themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Shreyas. This was awesome. Shreyas is recovering and classifying a visual language that was made to travel across communities. It's wonderful to see. Narges Sedarat's work takes belonging itself as the question, asking what it means to feel at home in a space, a language, a body, and whether design can make that experience not just visible, but physically felt. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Hello, my name is Narges Sedat. I'm an MFA candidate in graphic design at ECU. My project is to focus designing belonging through position as a question that feels deeply personal, but also increasingly contemporary. What does it mean to belong when our lives are constantly moving? Today, many of us move between cities, countries, languages, platforms, classrooms, screens, and social spaces. Even when we are not physically migrating, we are often shifting between different versions of ourselves. We learn new codes, we adjust our language, we read new environments, we try to understand where to stand. So for me, belonging is not simply a place we arrive at. It is not only home, nationality, or identity. I understand belonging as a fragile condition of alignment between body, language, memory, and space.
This project began with a simple feeling of disorientation, the moment when something familiar no longer feels fully familiar, when recognition slows down and meaning does not arrive immediately. I became interested in that delay. Instead of disorientation, I began to ask, can design transform disorientation into a way of seeing? The installation is built around a suspended typography question. What does belong mean? The words are laser cut from golden plexiglasses and suspended at different height in the lobby of the art school. From most position, especially from above, the letter appears fragmented, scattered, or almost unreadable. They are present, but they don't immediately make sense. Only from one specific position on the ground floor do the fragments align and become legible. This is the central idea of the work, meaning this is the central of the idea of the work. Meaning is not fixed inside the object. Meaning happens through relation. It depends on where the viewer stands, how the body moves, how the architecture frames the view, and how language becomes visible through position. In this sense, reading becomes a bodily act. The viewer cannot see a message. They have to search for it. They have to move, pause, look again, and locate themselves in relation to the work. This process reflects my large understanding of belonging. Belonging is not always something we possess. Sometimes it is something we construct through small acts of orientation. We adjust, we reposition, we search of coherence. The material choice also matters. The golden plexiglass reflects light, but it also reflects the viewer. So when someone tries to read, their own body becomes part of the visual field. They are not outside the question. They are inside. This is important because belonging is never only abstract. It is felt through the body. It is felt when we enter a room and wonder if we are allowed to be there. It is felt when we speak in a second language and wait to see if we are understood. It is felt when a place slowly becomes familiar or when a familiar place suddenly becomes distant. To extend the installation beyond the physical side, I also developed a digital version in P5GS. In that version, the viewer's cursors affects the movement of the fragment on a screen. As the cursor moves, the words shift between angles and alignment. The screen becomes another space where meaning appears, disappears, and reappears through movement. This digital extension is important because contemporary belonging is not only physical. We also belong or fail to belong through digital system, through interfaces, platforms, visibility, responses, delay, and interaction. The same question continue. What condition allow meaning to become visible? Through this project, typography becomes more than a carrier of language. It becomes a spatial system. It becomes a way to ask how meaning forms, how it breaks apart, and how it might become coherent again. Ultimately, fragment coherence suggests that design can do more than communicate a fixed message. Design can create condition for perception. It can slow us down. It can ask us to move differently, to look differently, and to become aware of our own position. And perhaps belonging emerges in that moment, not as a permanent answer, but when body, language, space, and meaning briefly come into alignment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nargis. Nargis' installation asks its question from a specific position in space. Belonging is only legible from one vantage point or when all things align and suddenly make sense for us. And the work holds that contingency as its central argument. I really love the poetry behind this project. And Hannah G's research operates in a context where belonging is structurally denied. Working with Rohingya's adolescent girls in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, she asks what design can do when the conditions that make belonging possible have been systematically dismantled. Go ahead, Hannah.
Sorry. Are you able to see my presentation?
We are.
Perfect. Hello. My name is Hannah G, and I am a recent graduate of the Master of Design and Communication Design program at the University of Arkansas. I enjoy exploring the intersection between design and social impact and all the ways that we can use design for good. Today, I'll be sharing my MDes thesis with a focus on designing facilitated experiences to expand educational access for adolescent Rohingya girls. So the Rohingya are the world's largest stateless population and often referred to as the most persecuted minority in the world. Today, more than 1 million Rohingya refugees live in refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, making up the largest refugee settlement in the world. Lack of infrastructure, local government policies, strict cultural and social norms, safety concerns, and as well as recent cuts in humanitarian funding create layers of barriers for Rohingya girls to access education. Most girls are forced to drop out of schools between the ages 10 and 12, and many are pushed into marriage at a young age. I had the privilege of traveling to Cox's Bazar earlier this year to conduct field research in the Rohingya refugee camps. Through focus groups and workshops with young adolescent girls, interviews with stakeholders, and ethnographic research, I sought to better understand the core of the issue and the lived experiences of the Rohingya community. So in synthesizing theories about storytelling, behavior, and human development, I made the connection that facilitated participatory storytelling that is designed to address the developmental needs of young adolescents, helps strengthen psychological capital, which then helps individuals navigate education while also influencing the systems that shape access to it. And because I worked specifically with young adolescents, I pulled from the 7 key developmental needs of young adolescents, including competence and achievement, self-definition, creative expression, meaningful participation, positive social interaction, structure and clear limits, and physical activity, although I don't really talk about physical activity in my workshops. In order to design and facilitate participatory experiences, I adapted this design facilitation framework from Mosley and Markowski's literature and their synthesis on the theory of practice architectures. And based on this framework, I created the facilitation for developmental needs of young adolescents model to guide the design of my workshops. So by mapping how each developmental need is addressed through specific activities and strategies, this tool allowed me to be intentional about what the activities as well as how the workshops were led. So the workshops combine storytelling with a range of art-based activities like collage self-portraits, painting and stamping, giving the girls the opportunity to define and express themselves and their aspirations in creative ways. The girls also got to share their stories with other participants, which helped build connection and a sense of community among them. There was a noticeable difference between the first and the second day in the engagement from the participants. They were much more willing to share and more actively engaged on the second day, highlighting the importance of repeated interactions. Through the research, I found that while existing NGO-led programs and community-based schools are contributing to incremental progress, a more systemic collaboration across stakeholders is needed to expedite change and meaningfully expand educational access for Rohingya girls. Which brings me to the Happy Initiative. Based on the research, I proposed a multi-layered design approach that works across different parts of the girls' lives while mainly focusing on the systems that are closest to them. So first, building agency and a sense of community through the creative storytelling workshops, as well as a mentorship program connecting Rohingya women who are currently attending universities with younger girls in the camps to help provide more visible role models and a pathway. Second, by strengthening the partnership between community-based schools and humanitarian organizations, the initiative would support long-term stability while exploring connections with higher education institutions to create more opportunities for continued learning for the Rohingya girls. Another important aspect is addressing social norms that shape girls' access to education. So through public-facing opportunities like exhibitions and performances, the initiative aims to amplify girls' voices and create spaces for dialogue. It also supports existing NGO-led education and counseling efforts while using visual communication to raise awareness about the value of girls' education and address stigma. Lastly, the initiative seeks to expand opportunities that can help bring attention to the lived experiences of the Rohingya girls while fostering empathy and engagement at a broader scale. Through these efforts, HAPPY brings together strategies that support both individual growth and systemic change, helping girls imagine and pursue their futures while also working to expand the conditions that make those futures possible. When we bring design into the humanitarian space and collaborate with existing systems, we have the power to reimagine human experiences and create a positive impact in the lives of those whose voices are often overlooked. Through facilitated participatory experiences at the individual and community level, design can help foster hope and shift perceptions within the community to expand educational access for Rohingya girls. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Hannah. We can kick off our moderated discussion now that will last for about 20 minutes. I can start with the question. Several of these projects involve designers working with communities navigating precarity, like reproductive health stigma, diasporic identity, statelessness. What does ethical engagement look like when the design artifact can't fully address the structural conditions it's responding to? Anyone can go ahead and respond or chime in.
I mean, I can say something. So I think about that a lot because I'm talking about women's health, and there's a lot that has gone on in recent and past history with women's health, and I think a big part about what I question about staying ethical is if I'm going to ask these women, and something I want to move forward to is talking about reproductive rights in terms of abortion, and I question myself this too, living in Tennessee. How can I still be ethical asking these women to share stories? So I think for me is to ensure anonymity, for it to keep anonymous. Sorry, I can't say that word right now. And working with the IRB office and just understanding like there are repercussions for the people I'm researching. Yeah, I don't know if that answers it, but
It sort of does. I mean, your platform is sort of a living archive, which I think connects also to Shreya's in recovering uncredited illustrators. Both are, in some sense, preserving voices not designed to last. Maybe you can take your take on this.
Yeah, I think in the case of the stuff that I have been studying, a lot of like the people who are making the work are also the people who are organizing. So like a lot of the people who are, when they are credited, they are the people who are also named multiple times as heading or like running these groups, like when you like go through council record meetings and things like that. So there's a lot of like direct connection between what they're making and why they're making it and who they're sending it to. But what's kind of interesting also is the level of transparency they have. If you go through issues of Mukti, they are very public about all of the dissent that they have in amongst the editors, even in just like, oh, we wanted this issue to be about this topic, but then we couldn't agree upon this. And so now we have all of these different voices and all of these different contributors who've talked about it in these different ways, which I found really interesting and kind of refreshing, because it wasn't like a here's our solution to how we're doing this, but more of a these are the problems we have and we can't agree on it sometimes, but we're trying to make it work.
Wondering about Nargis and Hannah. I mean, both are working from personal or proximate experience of displacement and in-betweenness. I'm wondering about your opinion.
I think what Shreyas just said about like not coming in with a solution from like the Mukti perspective was a big thing for me. Like until I actually went and came back with the research, I I didn't really have like a solid research question that has like all the things laid out, because I didn't want to come in with a solution as an outsider, not knowing about what their lived experiences are. And for me, I think ethical engagement is really about honoring the lived experiences, like me not coming in as like a design solution and like a savior kind of thing, but really just coming in and listening with empathy, and really letting the experiences on the field guide my research was a big thing for me.
Nargis?
Yeah, for me, because belonging affects how people interact with each other and with place, with communities, technologies, and each other, and understanding how it forms allows designers to create more meaningful experience. And I think design shapes how people understand and navigate and experience the world. And for me, the belonging is the personal question. But when I came in here as a migration, I feel it's very important for the people in live in all countries. It's not just for the migration. For example, the peoples move from one city to another city, and from one state to another state. The belonging can show how we perceive ourselves and our environment, and then design can influence those experiences.
Thank you. We have a few questions from the chat that we can also read here. Let me scroll back. Okay, so we have a question from Michael for Holly. As you engage in the review of scholarly literature that helped you and is perhaps still helping you frame your research, what other design-rooted research and the reporting about this have you utilized? For example, the work of Marie-Louise Yule-Sondergaard.
Yeah, so some scholarly research, there's a couple books that were really foundational, such as one that I've been really like leaning in towards right now is called Just Get on the Pill, and the author's last name is Littlejohn. And it kind of talks about the responsibility that women have, and also about consent. And I think it's really informational. Specific design research, I can't think of any on the top of my head. I know that there are a few that when I was creating care stories and figuring out what was I going to do, if I was going to do a consciousness raising group, how was I going to learn these stories? I forget her name. I'm very bad at names, but she would go and sit in two doctors' offices with women and kind of illustrate their experience. And I thought that was very interesting. And I still think about, I really love when research does this like thinking and making at the same time. So that was very inspirational. And in the same vein, there was another designer I saw that was having people kind of draw out like their pain and their symptoms in their body, which was also very interesting. So, I think I lean in towards, that stuff. But there's definitely a lot more I need to look into. I'm definitely going to look into the designer you suggested. And if you have any more suggestions, I would be happy because, I want to move into the next phase of care stories, and all of the scholarly work I can take in and be inspired by would be great. Thanks.
Um, Holly, still, I'm wondering, you designed the survey to avoid symptom sharing and self-diagnosis, but has anything slipped through, and how did you handle that?
I do. So the first two submissions, things do slip through, and I just don't post them.
Okay.
So I kind of do act as a curator. And it's the stories have been a small amount of submissions to where I can do that. Or if something, it's really, I think today there's a fine line between talking about women's health and then all of a sudden getting into this other area that can be harmful. So, I just don't post them if I think it could create harm.
Shreyas, this is a question by Michael. What was the distribution reach of Mukti and Shakti during their history in across the regions where they were published?
This is something I didn't get into in my presentation, but these Mukti and Shakti were distributed not just in the UK, but they're sort of part of what the authors of the book Desi Queers describe as the Brown Atlantic. But they used it to sort of forge community and networks of care with similar feminist groups in the North American continent and also in South Asia. So these magazines were distributed in these places also, but then they had different ways of doing it. Sometimes they would just send one copy and tell people, you can like to another magazine and say, if someone else wants it, just Xerox the thing and send it on to them for a small fee. So they were okay with like a sort of permissioned bootlegging of their periodicals so that it would have a greater reach, but they also collaborated in different ways. So sometimes people who, like one of the illustrations I had from Shakti Khabar was actually originally published in, or like made by a member of a US-based queer South Asian group called Trikon. And they would sort of like make sure that that was a way in which they would cross-pollinate some of their stuff. So the reach was definitely not just contained to the UK. I will also say that these were very brief periodicals. Mukti ran for maybe 4 years and then published only 7 issues, mostly because of they stopped because of a lack of funding and just like manpower because they were trying to translate each issue into 7 other languages. And Shakti Khabar, I think, ran for like 3 years and they maybe have about 15, 17, something like that issues. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting to see how much they produced in a short amount of time and the kind of reach that it had, given that stuff wasn't being shared through the internet at that time.
I want to go back to the Cali image, actually. It appears almost exclusively with Black women's and queer groups rather than South Asian women's groups. What does that distribution tell you about how South Asian iconography was being read and claimed across different communities?
Yeah, I think the thing with Kali especially is that I think she's used as a symbol of like feminist empowerment quite often because like it's a female deity and there's like she's one of the more violent female deities, if I may say. So we have a lot of female gods in Hinduism, but a lot of them are powerful but not unruly. And Kali is quite unruly, and she is, it's a very violent symbol because she has like a beheaded man, his head in like one hand, and like there's blood, there's like skulls. So I think she's used a lot because of those reasons by groups that are not just South Asian. But I think in case of British South Asian diaspora, it's a slightly different set of influences that they draw from, because even if they're sort of coming from like African countries, a lot of them were also like influenced by Indians because Indians did migrate to Africa and then were expelled. Like, for example, Indians from Uganda were expelled by Idi Amin. and they all migrated to Britain. But those communities sort of had influences on the local communities as well, or like even the Caribbean, for example, there were Indian indentured laborers there who were sent by the British. So there's a lot of, I think, of like this crossover of just cultural references that happened even before they arrived in Britain. And sometimes those pieces, like the Kali image, for example, becomes a quick way to signal who the group is for and what they stand for. Yeah, but it's also interesting because this image of Kali is actually the most fully clothed, or like the most clothed version I've seen so far, because in like typical iconography of Kali, she's wearing a skirt of like hands that she's cut off of people, like arms that she's cut off of people. Her chest is bare, but it's just covered with like skulls. So I'm still thinking about what that could actually mean that they're using this version, or where they got that image from, or if someone created it. Those are all answers I don't have and might not have ever at any point.
It's part of the research. It's fantastic. Narges, the digital P5 animation that you had replicates the spatial logic through cursor movement. What does that translation tell you about what the physical installation is actually doing? If you could just unmute, that would be wonderful. We still cannot hear you. Kat, is it possible to unmute? Thank you.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nowadays, because in the modern lives, every time we use our screens, platforms, and digital systems, and for me, in my idea, the belonging has a um, different meaning in different surface and screens. And I think with the P5GS, or with the technology, or another technologies and tools as a touch designers or any softwares, we can engaging and connections the peoples with another technology, and show the different meaning of belonging in the modern live, I think. Yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Hannah, I also have a question for you. You say you came in without a set agenda, seeking to understand first, but then you also arrived with a design framework, a methodology, a thesis structure. Where did those two things create tension in the field?
I think it was a constant struggle of because when I was doing secondary research before I went on the field, like I had to have some sort of an agenda to work with. And then it was very helpful to understand kind of like the general kind of the experiences that they were having. So that helped me come up with the framework and kind of design the workshops. And so I think that I was treating the workshop on the field as kind of a prototype of the framework and how to design these kind of experiences. But when I was on the field, there was a constant kind of pivoting and constantly just having to adjust. Maybe there were some things that I had planned on that really didn't make sense for the field and the technology. And so there was constantly adjustments that had to be made. And there's, yeah, always, that was always a struggle.
Michael has another question for you. He asked, what are the specific age groups of the young women that you've chosen to study and yield benefit toward? Why did you choose that particular age group?
So I was working specifically with young adolescents in the ages 10 to 14 because through secondary research, I found that that is when the most notable dropout rates happen for the girls. A lot of them once they hit puberty, they're not really allowed to go outside the homes. And there's a lot of stigma that happens around like period and things like that. So that's why I chose that age group.
That's Wonderful discussion. We have 2 more minutes. Should we ask one more? Anyone wants to ask another question to each other? I want to give space if you're curious about each other's work. Thank you all for these great presentations. And wonderful discussion that we've had. If you have any more questions, could we please put them in the chat now or in the Q&A section so that I can ask them? Otherwise, I still have more questions and I can't do it backwards. Hannah, actually, design alone cannot resolve forced displacement. I'm sure you already know that. Where did you see the limits most clearly, like moments where the workshop created something real that could not travel outside the room?
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. Where did you see the limits most clearly? When, like my thought is that design cannot resolve forced displacement. And you probably had that feeling too. And I'm just curious about where you saw the limits most clearly, moments where the workshop created something real that still could not travel outside the room.
Yeah, so I definitely agree that design alone cannot solve forced displacement, and there were a lot of limits that I had to work with. But I think the most notable one is that aside from displacement, just like the perceptions and social norms that have been kind of embedded in their traditions for centuries, that could it is going to take time to actually make a change in that. And the workshops were more focused on kind of helping the girls express themselves, build agency, build a sense of community, but then having actually how does that like translate to outside of that, because they're not used to speaking for themselves and they're not really allowed to, they're not really given the platform to be able to do that. So there was a little bit of like barrier that I felt in that. Yes, I can work with the girls and to make these changes within them, but then how does that translate to actually creating pathways for them, because there's a lot of like Bangladeshi like local government laws prohibit them from getting Bangladeshi education. So then they're only like limited to education within the refugee camps. And so like how does that actually translate to actually giving them opportunities? I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Got it. Now, I guess the installation that you made makes belonging legible from one specific position. I thought that was brilliant. Was that intentional? Was that the goal from the very beginning, or did you discover that as you were making it?
Yeah. At the, in during my research, I understand when the on the that point that moment that communication and connection happens with the people with different angles, with different state, with different languages, have them, and when they can have a good connection to each other and meaning create, the belonging happens. For this reason, this point on the floor, that that moment, that meaning happens, and after that the belonging happens.
I can totally relate to that. That was great. Shreyas, you started with genuine confusion, which I also thought was wonderful. You let the process unfold. What does this illustration, why does this illustration appear here? How has sitting with that confusion shaped the taxonomy rather than resolving it too quickly?
Yes, there was a lot of confusion throughout the process. I think my initial confusion, I'm glad that I had that because it offered me something that I realized I wanted to know more about, but also I think I was immediately humbled by my lack of being able to pinpoint immediately why a thing was appearing somewhere, even though I was like, this is clearly South Asian. So I just had to sort of like retreat and like arm myself with a little more information. I would highly recommend those two books that were in my the fuller version of my presentation that's on YouTube, because they definitely like gave me much more context for what the British South Asian diaspora experience is like, which is very different from my experience of being a South Asian immigrant in the US. But I think because of that, I just sort of went into the archives with my only intention was to just look at as much stuff as I could see in the time that I had. And I wasn't trying to search with the intention of finding specific things.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was able to because of that, I was able to just move through a large number of things in a very short amount of time. Like I was in 4 different archives and I looked at like hundreds of things in like a matter of days. And because there was so much, and I think because I was seeing things so in quick succession, without an agenda, it became easier for me to start maybe like making little piles of things to start making sense rather than here's how I think they did this, which was helpful because the thing I also realized, unless I actually talk to people, I'm not going to be able to know their intention, and I do not want to assume intent for why certain things were made. And it's possible I will just not be able to talk to a lot of them because I don't know who many of these people are, and some of them may not be alive now. But I think I don't think that the taxonomy is resolved at all. Like I'm calling it a preliminary taxonomy for a reason, right? Like if I find more things, I might come up with more categories, but it's more of a self-serving thing at this point, and I'm very clear about that. It's just a way for me to make sense of the work and not a way for me to create, like attach meaning to what they're making.
And then we have a final question by Jonathan Edwards. Throughout your work, despite the limitations, do you also see new areas where visual design can make an impact? Anyone can take it. Perhaps Holly.
Okay. So where visual design can create impact.
Mhm.
So like I was saying in Care Stories, I just did a little bit of a brand refresh, and before I did that, the reproductive health icons that I have that are now images were illustrations, so they weren't so realistic. And then for this rebrand, I was like, no, we need to show, what an IUD looks like, what, put a pad on there, have these realistic images instead of these more idealized illustrations. So I think that's a part where in recently Care Stories visual design has created an impact to further that destigmatization of these topics.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for these wonderful presentations. I had a great time listening to all of you and engaging in questions. It's time for session number 2, and Kat will take it from here.
Thank you, everyone, so much. What a great conversation. We have a second session that's starting. So you're going to see some people flipping on your screen in front of you as we get the next panel set up. The next session is called Design Pedagogy and Process and Systems. In this session, we'll focus more on how design is taught, structured, and practiced across different contexts. These presentations explore pedagogical approaches, process-driven methods, and emerging tools, highlighting how designers build frameworks that shape learning, research, and professional practice. Please join me in welcoming Cindy Raspiller, lecturer at San Jose State University, Anna Jordan, assistant professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, with graduate students Aisha El-Nouri, Jatin Joshi, and Unika Dwaka. Niharika Galamuraju, an adjunct professor at Boston University and University of Connecticut, and Borami Kang, MFA candidate in Design Research and Development at The Ohio State University. We'll begin with Cindy's presentation.
Thank you so much. Okay, are you all able to see my screen? Excellent.
Did you?
Thank you. Great. So yeah, my name is Cindy Raspiller. I'm a lecturer in graphic design at San Jose State University in San Jose, California. I completed my graduate studies there as well in 2025 with my culminating thesis project, The Shift Deck, Pragmatic Design Pedagogy Interventions for Climate Resilience. There we go. Climate resilience is rarely taught in visual communication design curricula, despite the growing recognition of design's role in addressing environmental challenges. This research investigates why this gap persists and how climate resilience can be meaningfully integrated into graphic design education. Standing on the shoulders of work like McDonough and Brongart's Cradle to Cradle and David W. Orr's Ecological Literacy, the Shift Deck is a pedagogical tool that uses conceptual frameworks and practical methods to position climate resilience as an integral aspect of contemporary design education. After analysis and synthesis of my initial research phase, I found that climate resilient design methodology is rarely taught in graphic design curricula for three main reasons. Visual communication design is not substantially physical in nature. Climate resilience is considered academically separate from design, and educators often see these ideas as too niche to be part of established curricula and often worry that they need more training to teach them. The research findings were synthesized into three interconnected frameworks that address curriculum structure, theory, and practical implementation. The first framework is the 5 levels of sustainability, pedagogy, and design education, and this organizes the way that design educators currently integrate sustainability in their teaching. At the level of content, concepts or writings may be used as passive content for layout and typography assignments. At the level of message, students deliver messaging around sustainable methods or ideas through their coursework. At the level of materials, students explore sustainable materials as a project requirement. At the level of complexity, students use concepts of sustainability as a lens for understanding the complexity of systems. And at the level of critical inquiry, students question the status quo or explore methods of reuse and regeneration through design. The second framework, the 7 mindsets of climate resilient designers, defines knowledge and practices necessary to build climate resilience and helps situate design within a broader context. The mindsets are each written as student-facing learning objectives, which Meredith Davis defines in her book, Teaching Design, as what faculty expect students to know, value, and be able to do. Here's the mindset engagement with policy. The learning objective states that students will recognize relationships between design and policy and advocate for and support environmental and climate policy through design. They will assess how their design practice can align with civic, cultural, and environmental climate goals. The graphic for each mindset is a visual representation of a biological strategy that embodies the mindset as it is practiced in nature. This aspect of the design is built on Janine Benyus's work in biomimicry and the Biomimicry Institute's collection of biological strategies on asknature.org, which is a great resource. I won't go into each one in detail today, but these are the remaining mindsets. Mindsets concerned with values help design students see the impact of their work beyond a dollar figure. Mindsets concerned with systemic realities help design students see their work as part of an interconnected, meaningful whole. And mindsets concerned with influence help design students see themselves as agents of positive change. The third framework is the project's design guidelines. Insights from my interviews with educators showed that in order for this project to be useful, it had to be adaptable to different courses and assignments. It had to scale with skill level or student advancement. It had to easily integrate into the professor's existing methods for course design and evaluation, and it had to teach skills that can be assessed and prepare students for future design careers. Refined through phase 3, which was interactive prototyping and student-centered co-design workshops, these 3 frameworks inform the development of the Shift Deck. Each card is a shift, something a student can do or learn within the context of an existing design project or assignment that will support climate resilience. These are currently 27 small but powerful steps, like using a carbon calculator or eliminating waste. Inspired by the IDEO method cards, this bottom-up approach allows educators to advocate for climate-resilient design practices without completely overhauling their curriculum. Each shift is organized into a mindset it supports and is further categorized into one of the 5 levels of sustainability in design education, as well as suggested course subjects. The individual shifts are written and organized so educators can easily assess effectiveness and fit them into their teaching. As my career as an educator and design researcher continues, I've already had the opportunity of implementing some of these shifts in classes and workshops with students and local government, as well as using them as a basis for planning research initiatives and course instruction. And I hope others can too. I have my QR code here. You guys are welcome to scan that and download a copy of the shift deck. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Cindy's shift deck works by inserting small changes into existing structures, the premise being that transformation doesn't always require dismantling what's already here. Anna Jordan and her collaborators are working from a similar instincts. You may not need to rebuild the typography curriculum to introduce global scripts. You need the right people in the room and students who are willing to make form before they know what they're doing. You can take it from there.
Can somebody give me a thumbs up if you can see my slide?
2
Perfect.
thumbs up.
Okay, my name's Anna Jordan. I'm an assistant professor at Rochester Institute of Technology in the Visual Communication Design program. And I'm presenting on behalf of my colleagues Aisha Al-Nouri, Unica Dakwa, and Jatin Joshi. We recognized a gap in typography education, and that is that most introductory type courses in the United States focus exclusively on Latin letter forms. Meanwhile, industry design practice is highly multilingual, and we owe it to every student, regardless of native language, to introduce multilingual type at the start of their education. We saw an opportunity to address this in our own program. We wondered, can short format sprint workshops effectively introduce multilingual scripts into an existing beginning typography course? And the solution that we proposed and tested was a series of 3 short workshops. Each workshop was just 1 class period, and we dedicated 1 script per workshop. Each workshop was led by a graduate instructor with personal expertise in the script. Aisha Al-Nouri taught Arabic, Unica Dakwa taught Hangul, and Jatin Joshi taught Gujarati. All 3 workshops that they designed implemented a method that we call learn, play, make. Learn, gain just enough structural knowledge of the script to begin working with it. Play, explore its formal qualities freely without worrying about fluency. And make, channel that exploration into a finished design outcome within the single class session. Next, I'll give a quick overview of the workshops on behalf of the graduate instructors. My colleague Aisha Al-Nouri is from Kuwait, and her first language is Arabic. Her workshop focused on square kufi, which is a geometric style of Arabic calligraphy. Students chose one of 3 phrases that Aisha had prepared in Arabic in advance. And the assignment was to translate the Arabic phrase into a piece of square kufi lettering. Aisha had students start sketching their phrases on grid paper. And then once the sketches felt resolved, students moved to Illustrator and learned the Shape Builder tool. The grid logic of square kufi translated very naturally to vector. These are a couple of finished pieces. These students had never worked in Arabic before. They were starting from absolutely 0. But by the end of a less than 3-hour class session, they were able to design these pieces of refined square kufi lettering. My colleague Unica Dakwa is from Nepal. Unica learned Korean as a teenager, which enabled her to design and lead this workshop. Unica's workshop was inspired by dojang stamps, a traditional Korean seal used as a signature. Unica prepared each student's name in Hangul before the workshop. And then her workshop was divided into 2 parts. First, create a dojang stamp using one's name in Hangul, and then use the dojang stamp graphic to design a postcard. Once students learned to write their names in Hangul, they designed their dojang stamp variations by placing their names inside geometric containers. And then we moved to Illustrator, where Unica taught the students how to use the pattern tools, and they created their postcards using their stamp graphics. Here you can see the dojang stamp applied to a postcard. This student used the letter forms in repeating patterns to create background textures. And here this student used the radial repeat tool to create a snowflake form with the Hangul characters. And then finally, my colleague, excuse me, Jatin Joshi is from India, and he taught the Gujarati workshop. Jatin designed a workshop that he called the hybrid word. Students started with an English word, and then they swapped out one Latin letter for a Gujarati character based on phonetics. And then the students created a piece of lettering to express that word, first by sketching and then in vector. These are sketches for the word memory, swapping out the middle M for the Gujarati ma. And the final execution here, the hybrid word interacts with this layered sky image. In this hybrid word, the student was trying to make the Gujarati phonetic swap look like it belonged in the middle of this continuous sweeping stroke. And that student translated their sketch into this 3D calligraphic piece of vector lettering. So not only did the students get exposed to global typography, they also were learning some fundamental important Illustrator tools in each of these workshops. Upon completion of the workshop series, we evaluated the outcomes to determine if the workshops were effective. We assessed the effectiveness based on several forms of evidence, and 4 themes emerged from our evidence. Our first theme, letter forms are shapes. Typography operates as a universal formal system, regardless of language. So working with unfamiliar scripts strengthens students' typographic thinking broadly across all languages. Students' feedback captured the moment of stepping outside of Latin-centric thinking. They recognized that no matter the language, designers everywhere make similar decisions about balance and form and shape. Design skills are not language dependent. This was a really important takeaway. The second theme that emerged was that the sprint format reduced fear, making learning feel like play. Students described the experience as fun, engaging, and uplifting. The inherent limitations of the short time period transformed a topic that could be intimidating into something accessible. Students knew that they were not expected to learn another language in just 2 or 3 hours, so they were able to relax and focus on making form. A third theme that emerged was that the workshops series sparked genuine curiosity and awareness beyond the classroom. One student wrote that before the workshop, multilingual typography had never crossed their mind, and remarked that the experience opened another door of possibility. So these workshops succeeded in making students aware of a very important topic for the first time. And the fourth and final theme that emerged in our analysis is that students grew in confidence, but with thoughtful nuance. One student wrote, "I have a very innate fear of misrepresenting any culture or language. So if I do it, I want to do it right and do it well." Students were really thinking critically and ethically about the stakes of multilingual design during these workshops. And the workshop succeeded in conveying that multilingual typography is really meaningful work that deserves care. So to close, I want to return to the question we started with. Can short format sprint workshops effectively introduce multilingual scripts into a beginning typography course? Based on our evidence, the answer is yes. We believe that the earlier students encounter global typography, the better prepared they will be for the industry that they are entering. If you are interested in trying this in your own program, it's very low stakes. It just takes 2 to 3 hours, one class period to run one of these workshops. Aisha, Unica, and Jatin have shared their workshop materials. Jatin is going to drop a link into the chat, which goes to a Google Drive folder that contains all of their slideshows, handouts, assignment descriptions, all the necessary materials to run these workshops in your own program if you'd like to try it. On behalf of my colleagues Aisha, Unica, and Jatin, we thank you very much for the opportunity to share our research with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Anna. Anna's workshop asks students to step outside the Latin alphabet and discover that letter forms are shapes before they are a language. Niharika Lamraju's ALT methodology takes this idea a little further, proposing that meaning in design emerges not from a starting concept, but from the relationships between things, and that the most interesting design begins not with a new idea, but with careful attention to what already exists. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dina. That was a wonderful transition. I'm Niharika Yelamraju, and I'm a MFA graphic design graduate from Boston University. And I'm currently spending my time as an adjunct instructor, visiting lecturer, and guest critic across various universities around Boston. And working across these different contexts, I began noticing a very common pattern in graphic design. As designers today, we are navigating an unprecedented abundance of information, references, tools, and automated systems thrown at us. And I became interested in where meaningful design decisions actually begin, more specifically, how relationships between seemingly unrelated things can become a starting point for design. Whoop. And it all starts with this key. And I'm sure many of you know this. It's the Alt key that we all see on our computers today. And Alt key does nothing on its own. It always works in combination with something else. And for me, that became a useful way to think about design, not because design lacks ideas, but because it increasingly begins with too many of them. And Alt proposes that design emerges not simply by finding relationships, but by deliberately constructing them. And this presentation actually began the same way many design projects do. I'm sure you guys relate to this too, is by staring at a blank page for far, far, far too long. And today, a blank page is never really blank. Before we begin designing, we're already surrounded by references, collections, screenshots, bookmarks, citations, mood boards, and a lot more. And the challenge isn't finding information, it's deciding what do we do with all of this. And every project begins with material that has already existed in the past. And the question becomes, how do you work with those intentionally? And Lev Manowitz here observation that contemporary culture increasingly operates through combinations of existing materials became the starting point for this research during my thesis exploration. We often ask students to be original, but we never make it explicit and how this originality develops. How do they work with it? How do they start bringing it into their work? And all suggest that originality emerges through constructing new relationships rather than isolated ideas, so we can work with all this information that we have. And all the methodology all works across four interconnected components: medium, method, matter, and memory. And rather than treating these as separate stages, as most graphic design processes do, one after the other, Alt understands design as constructing relationships between these simultaneously. The inquiry identifies these relationships, but Alt constructs them into the final outcome. And building on Roland Barthes' idea that meaning exists in relationships rather than isolated objects, Alt asks designers how they can actively construct those relationships through their design practice. And this started with collecting references for my thesis. And I realized I had thousands of information, and I only remembered random passages that I've read in these books or movies or references, but I never really remembered what the bibliographic information actually was. And I started organizing these passages into library cards, but with the quote that I saw or that I remembered, making the final system feeling something familiar, but also intriguing. And I could actually connect back to the original reference. And looking back, I realized this same way of thinking had quietly shaped how I facilitated courses, critiques, and workshops, revealing that extended beyond my own studio practice into a pedagogy. And before I discuss the following outcomes, I'd like to acknowledge Professor Dina here. I'm so glad you're here today, who designed the original University of Connecticut GD2 course, including its syllabus, project briefs, Notion course systems that will be mentioned. I just had the opportunity to teach within this course as an adjunct instructor this spring, and the student work shown here was developed within this framework. As for the brief, students first collected more than 50 plus items of their interest before actually deciding what kind of collection they want to build and what that might mean. Meaning emerged slowly through collecting, observing, and organizing the existing material they had in hand. One student discovered that her collection of receipts wasn't exactly documenting her purchases or what she bought, but her relationships, connections, and experiences she had with people at those places and locations, extending this connection into a living archival installation that people can add to. Another project reworked the childhood postcards that he received from his grandparents into a book that links the geography of the United States with family history, connection, and memory, transforming a traditional map that we see today into an interactive publication. A third student uncovered patterns of use by recording where discarded bandages appeared in her daily commute, rather than focusing on the conventional use of band-aids themselves or where we traditionally see them appear. And this approach highlighted an alternate perspective on a very familiar item. Although the outcomes differed, they shared the same process. Inquiry identified relationships, and alt transformed those relationships into their final design. The same process extended into a wayfinding workshop where students documented existing signage before designing anything new. They observed and started mapping what they saw around them, and that became a starting point for design without hierarchy, typography, or legibility being formally taught to them. For me, that's the shift that Alt proposes. Instead of asking, what should I make? It begins with another question. What is this already connected to? And what new relationships can I construct? The same methodology extends beyond graphic design into classrooms, archives, publications, physical spaces, and a lot more. In the post-digital condition has changed how we encounter information and visual culture, and all proposes a methodology that positions relational construction rather than isolated ideas as the central engine for design. And I leave you with a question that continues to guide my own practice. What relationships are you not seeing yet? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Niharika. Niharika's project asks designers to slow down, to accumulate, to find relationships between things, to resist the pressure to arrive at an idea before they've understood the material and what they're connected to. Borami Kang's research asks what happens when the tools we use every day are actively working against that kind of slowness. When AI features embedded as defaults redirect our attention before we've even had a time to form a question. Go ahead. We can see, but we can't hear. There is an unmute button on the bottom left. There we go.
Okay. Now everybody can hear. Okay. Hello. Thank you for inviting, and I'm glad to meet everyone here. I'm Barami King, Master of Fine Art, candidate in Design Research and Development at the Ohio State University. and I'm graduating this summer, looking for a design faculty job, just so you all know. And my presentation is about my preliminary study that I did for my graduate thesis last November. So please be mind that the applications and tools might have been updated after this. And my title is Nudge by Design, How AI Features Reshape Researcher Agency and Everyday Research Tools. So as a design researcher and web designer with my professional background before, I started noticing these tools that I use every day for research, like searching, writing, and organizing, are quietly adding all these AI features directly into their interfaces as defaults rather than add-ons. And the embedded means these features are embedded in research platform itself that includes AI features such as question generation, but in the research setting, it can be workflow automation, documenting drafting or protocol support, and helping with analysis. So recent research shows that benefits of using AI integrated tools in the research can help faster literature review, as you all know, writing support, and better productivity. But there's also growing concerns about shallow knowledge, being dependent on these knowledge, which might have unclear sources, which needs also fact checking. So based on the literature review, what I caught my attention wasn't what AI could help, but it was how these AI features in the system are reshaping my own thinking as a researcher. And using human-centered AI design, it argues for designing AI to augment human abilities, not replace them, by focusing on human control and values and needs. And the distribution cognition word from Hutchins, in this system, it means in this system, because thinking behind the users does not happen solely inside the human mind, but it happens across the people, artifacts, and representation and technology. And I also looked at the user agency of this system, which is a sense of the agency of a user doing the task in this system, which is perceived control over the interface and the felt correspondence between one's intentional action and the outcomes they produce. And based on the nudge theory from the behavioral science, in the marketing is the concept of altering environment to influence behavior predictably without restricting freedom of choice. And also persuasive technology by Fogg explores how interactive digital tools can be designed to intentionally change human attitudes and behaviors. So together, I arrived at the main question: how do these generative AI features in the research tools reshape researchers' experience and the agency? So to answer this question, I use self-reflective observation, a qualitative UX design research method in which I intentionally assume the role as a user, as a researcher, to examine my own experience and the feelings during the micro-level interaction with different AI research platforms while performing real research tasks. So 5 platforms were selected based on the researchers' most frequently used tools for general different research tasks. And these platforms have well-established pre-AI history that I used to use these before that now integrated AI features into the system recently. So to collect the data systematically, I adopted the empathy mapping framework to capture what the researcher thinks, feels, says, and does. And this visual UX design tool categorizes observation into 4 quadrants to develop deeper understanding of the researcher, user, myself in this study, and was adopted to uncover the researcher's behavior and track emotional cognitive shifts across the different time intervals. So first 10 minutes of research activities on each platform were recorded by capturing desktop screen recording to document what I did, and audio facial expression to capture what researcher felt, and think aloud protocol to capture what researcher thought and said. So the first result reveals that how AI feature appear as visual defaults with enchanted look, with magical icons and different color button design, floating toolbar that follows called cursor, prioritizing the placement, distinct interaction animations. And the second result shows the emotional trajectory across 10-minute interval. Initial curiosity, as you can see on the top, with positive. Actually, it quickly turned into overload, fatigue, and disorientation from the original research task by exploring these AI feature. And in several sessions, researcher lost track of the original research task because AI redirected attention toward generated outputs rather than my own inquiry. So the last result revealed that researchers' agency gradually eroded due to the loss of control. Example behaviors include keep going back, found myself keep going back to the what I asked questions, which book was I reading, and revisiting previous states when researcher attempted to retrieve their own thinking and original prompts. And the Google AI mode will not allow me to turn it off. So in the discussion of this study, the interfaces felt empowering and productive and with the fast, smart, and most magical designs at first, which naturally encourage reliance on it. But the result proves that how AI features are reducing opportunity to pause and reverse the decision and maintain the continuous lines of thought. So there is a hidden tension between the enchantment of the interface design and the experience of controlling. So this opens discussion about the gap between the perceived agency of the user, which is the feeling in control, and then actual agency of the user, which is the actual controllability. So perceived agency was shaped by the system communication style, like element design, but actual agency refers to the system's objective technical control. So this gaps matter. It becomes matter for researchers and users like us, and where they research with ambiguity and exploration and self-directed sense making. So this study raises a core question to platform designers, AI system designers, who practice responsible AI design. How do we design AI systems that support user agency without silently replacing it? So future studies should find measurable way to decrease this gap between perceived agency and actual agency so that everyday research platforms allow users with more fine-grained controllability to pause and reverse and customize and disengage from AI features if they want at any point. So human-centered AI design could also find ways to prioritize this trust and agency, not just efficiency. So as you all know, this has a limitation. It was done by a single researcher myself. It was self-observed study happened in 2025, so the tools might have been updated, but future work should expand to longitudinal observation and with different users involving real participants across the cultural comparisons because this was only done in North American tools. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Borami, for your presentation. Now we can go into our moderated discussion. We have about 20 minutes. I have an opening question for everyone. 3 of these presentations are concerned with tools, the Shift deck, the Sprint workshops, ALT, or alt as a system. What makes a pedagogical or process tool genuinely generative rather than just procedural? And where does Borami's research on AI nudges or like complicate that question a bit? I mean, Cindy, Anna, and Niharika are all making tools designed to be shared and adapted, and Borami's research shows that tools embedded as defaults can erode the very agency those tools claim to support. What are your thoughts?
I will answer behalf of Anna Jordan. I think so. Generative art and all the things, the core things are making it iterative again and again and again and again, and changing one of the aspect in the variation while generating it can cause a down the road a major new discovery down the road. And thus we learn while we are introducing new workshops to the students. We get their feedbacks after that as well, and we try to fine tune the whole process again and again and learn better and develop more better tools and education systems for the new upcoming generation as well. So yeah.
That makes sense to me. Anyone else?
I think based on my experience, when you're building tools to be generative rather than to be part of the process, it accounts to how much are you able to generate with that just one tool. And I've experienced where people give you something and all it does is answer that one step of your process where you are stuck, and nothing more, nothing less. But when you're generating a tool that asks you more questions, or you get more answers, you're able to put that into different contexts and keep creating rather than just get an answer to your one step. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Cindy?
Yeah, similar to Niharika's answer, I think a generative tool is one that has a bit of open-endedness to it. The idea with the shift stack, an educator can take one of these shifts and insert it into an existing assignment. And so rather than the tool walking them through, a specific project or a specific assignment, they're using it to enhance what they've already created. So it kind of generates something completely new by combining their current work with these new ideas that can be kind of included in there and enhance the project or assignment.
Anna, would you like to take a stab at this one?
I'll let Jatin speak. I don't want to be the only one speaking on behalf of our team here today.
Sounds good. That's awesome. So we do have a few questions in the chat. The first one I see is from Aggie Toppins. Hi, Aggie. Question for Niharika. I'm very interested in your methodology, but I would like to know more about what you are challenging. There is ample literature that challenges the idea of creativity as raw creation, yet the practice of starting a graphic design project by looking at visual discovery engines like Behance or Pinterest is relatively recent in the history of the discipline. I'm curious if you have secondary literature or more evidence that you can leverage to support claims of what a typical graphic design workflow is or has been.
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I think I'm less interested in challenging creativity itself and more interested in examining how our contemporary design workflows are increasingly relying on these visual platforms, visual discovery platforms, as a starting point. Because I've seen a lot of students who first jump to Pinterest or Behance before understanding how references are collected, how we can move beyond just visual similarity and understand relationships, histories, and contexts between them. So far, this thesis is still in development, and I've only recently kind of expanded into putting it into workshops or anything of that sort. So it's still in progress, and I will take this into consideration. But I agree that grounding this into more literature would strengthen the framing. But thank you for bringing that up.
I do have a question for you, Cindy. You talked about local government, and I'm very curious about that. bottom-up tools like this work when institutions don't mandate change, but does that also mean climate resilience stays optional and marginal? Or what would it take to shift this from a deck to a requirement? What happened with the local government?
Sure. So, as part of my graduate studies, I interned with the city of San Jose's Office of Cultural Affairs, and the city has a carbon neutral by 2030 goal. Um, and so I think it's less about I mean, it's definitely about making this more of a requirement, and less of a marginal topic. But having your students kind of engage with local policy, being aware of local policy, being aware of institutions that are mandating change or that are advocating for change, and then kind of exploring how your own work can be a valuable part of that, um, is kind of what that mindset is all about.
That sounds good. Anna, Jatin, another question. Each of you brought a personal relationship to your script. Aisha is a native speaker. Unika is a self-taught learner. Jatin, through your own cultural background, you're your own expert in Gujarati. How much does that personal stake matter? Could someone teach this with only structural knowledge of a script, as you suggest at the end? That's
Yes, the way we design the whole workshops where they don't need to understand the language itself. They just need to understand the framework, what different things go and how it's making different. As in the PPT presentation as well, we mentioned that language is just written shapes which we have given the meaning to. So we have to just broaden that spectrum so that the students can just think out that English is not just one language or written language. There are many other ways to write one thing as an expressive typography. There are in Latin as well. So that reinforces, and the language has just a bit of logic to it, that like mine Gujarati was having some matra system. So we just gave a cheat sheet to just follow, to make them follow that framework easily. So they didn't wanted to know that how to write or how to speak that particular word. They just need to understand how this form is being made, which is what the typography logic was at the first place.
I get
So
that.
yeah.
There is in one of your slides there was one genuinely dissenting voice on the confidence and the idea of, you know, ethical thinking within how do I use a script if I don't speak it. But what if that student is sort of right? Is there a version of this workshop that goes wrong, producing designers who treat non-Latin scripts as aesthetic resources?
There is nothing wrong, because at the end it's just a shape. You're not disrespecting anything, you're just drawing. We have given that drawing a particular word or meaning in that particular language or in a sense. You're not disrespecting anything. At the end it's just an art or design. So there is nothing wrong. You have to just learn and be open to learning itself. And while walking also, you have made too many stumbled or you have fallen down as well. But you get up and you walk again now. So yeah.
I think it's important too that this was a beginning typography class, and these students they're at the beginning of what's the rest of their career. We can't learn Latin typography in one typography class. So our goal was not to pretend that we're going to teach them everything they need to know about all these different unfamiliar scripts that are around the world. It was more just to say, hey, you need to be aware that Latin is not the, you know, only thing that you need to learn how to work with as a typographer. And look how cool and interesting the whole world of typography is. Here's a little taste. You can see how cool it is. And now, you know, go on and learn more and more and dive deeper. And, you know, it's just the very, very start, a little inspiration, spark of awareness. And all three of the instructors did a wonderful job in communicating that. So while yes, there was a dissenting voice, and certainly the students, couldn't leave from one class session and then call themselves fluent or an expert in any of these scripts. They all left with a heightened awareness and respect and appreciation. And as teachers, I think one of the best things we can teach our students is the more you learn about something, the more you realize you don't know. And I, in my 40s still, having studied typography for 20 years, feel like there's more to learn than ever before. So that I think is a really positive takeaway that Jatin and Unica and Aisha succeeded in giving to the students.
Thank you for planting the seed. I have a question for Niharika, sorry, for Burami actually. You talk about enchantment. AI feels fast and smart and almost magical. And boom, a click of things, and then here we go. Do you think that quality is accidental? Is it designed? And if it's designed, what does that mean for researchers trying to resist it?
I don't think it's accidental because platforms are trying to sell their AI features, how good they are, and it's all promoting how it could do everything. So I don't think it's accidental at all. And it's hard for us as a researcher to really resist all these pushes that tech companies are doing. But like also I feel the responsibility as a designer and researcher to keep studying this and become more aware of it. And scholars can also share this together, like this design incubation, like in this space. So yeah.
And then we have a question for you actually from Michael. Has your research thus far revealed any insights or aha types of revelation about how and perhaps why fast or slow AI nudging is affecting or could affect instinctive and or reflective thinking? The question is rooted in the ethical landscape regarding how AI systems respect human autonomy rather than merely exploit cognitive biases.
Yes, that's a very difficult question to
Yeah.
answer now, but that I'm what led this study to the next study that I'm doing now is studying the agency more in depth. And I feel the importance of studying granular agency and also in the education setting, how creative self-efficacy agency can be reshaped. And that, yeah, it is very another ethical issue for sure. Yes.
Thank you for your response. I do see more questions going back to Anna and Jatin. Sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble with the chat here, rewinding. Okay, Shreya Krishnan asked, perhaps following up on a question I had asked, I appreciated the way you said about introducing students to multilingual type through the workshops. It seems like you were able to lead with Aisha's expertise with Arabic, Unica's with Hangul, and Jatin's with Gujarati. I'm curious about your thoughts on how faculty might introduce workshops like this into typography classes in the absence of instructors with existing multilingual type script knowledge, which is something that I tried to get at. Thank you, Shreyas, for this follow-up.
I think so. A Google translation would also work. We didn't chose from scratch words or anything like that or big things. We were just using basic words like a person's name or just a quote from like a history and just translating it in that particular language. You don't need an expertise in that. You just research a bit and then fine tune the collaterals before teaching to them, and then can develop some cheat sheets which is readily available on the internet as well. And we just fine tune and resource all those things in the QR code in the Google Drive itself, so that one can easily replicate the whole process whichever way possible. Like you can translate it in Chinese as well.
Yeah, great answer. Jotted. I think there's so many resources, a book in the library, a video on YouTube, all over the internet to learn like the most fundamental basic start to this. And if professors go into the classroom and approach this like, I'm not an expert in this, you guys aren't an expert in this, let's start to learn this together. Here's what I figured out. We're going to try this exercise, and then maybe reach out to somebody on social media, or maybe there's an international student at the university, a friend, somebody that we could call in on Zoom and have as a guest critic for 45 minutes to, that maybe has not even necessarily fluency, but just more familiarity with the language we're talking about, and they can add some perspective that we might not have. But I think the key is in how we frame it, that this is new to me, the professor too. This is something that I feel is important that we are all aware of and make an effort to learn about. So let's do this together with the resources we have and try as best as we can. And for those students who are really inspired by this new awareness of this topic, they can proceed and go deeper and deeper into it as they wish.
Yeah, that's a wonderful response. Thank you. Niharika, you're the receipt student, the postcard students, the Band-Aid students. In each case, the real subject only became visible through accumulation and slow looking. How do you teach patience in a design culture that rewards speed and output?
One way that actually weirdly helps is by constraining them to slow down. I think the way the semester started was people were accumulating everything and they already had set ideas of what they wanted to do, where they wanted to go with things. But I had to pause a few weeks to have them revisit what they actually have because, again, the same point of the visual platforms, many of the students had overlapping ideas or very similar ideas because their references sources were exactly the same. So the point is you have to stop here, maybe give them a worksheet. The way I did it was give them a few worksheets that they had to sit and discuss as a class and see where they go with what information and what is something new that they can come up instead of being exactly the same thing. So it is very tricky because their attention always changes. But I think essentially just having them to sit down and not give them anything to constantly create does help in instances. And it doesn't have to be a long break as well. Just giving them like 10 minutes to rebrief and rethink works.
Thank you, Niharika. Also, great response. Cindy, Michael asked a question in the chat. What kinds of experiences have you had and what have you learned from them thus far in sharing your shift deck materials with, for example, faculty and researchers from areas across your or other university campuses who work in areas such as environmental science or environmental philosophy or biology? He said, can't remember if we hit this one. Oh, or that was cat. Never mind, bleep.
Yeah, so at this point, I've shared it with mostly educators. I haven't necessarily spoken directly with educators in environmental science in terms of like sharing that final product with them. I'm hoping to add that into my research process here. But it has been shared with design educators. It's been shared with folks who work in the cultural and arts space. And I've shared it with people who teach environmental science in like at the K through 12 level as well. And the feedback has been really great. I think one of the really interesting things about it is regardless of what you teach or what age group you teach, there's interesting things in there that you can pull out and apply to what it is you're doing. So it's been a mostly positive reception from that particular demographic. But yeah, I have yet to share it with a biologist or environmental scientist in its final iteration. If any of you are out there.
A final question for Burami from Jonathan Edwards. With AI being used as a magical tool for designers and non-designers, it does make me, as designer, wonder about if AI should be integrated into curricula as an essential skill like typography. Should AI be integrated in the curriculum?
So I definitely in the curriculum, yes. So I definitely think that all designers should try to see what AI tools can be good at and bad at. And it does help with like visual search, exploration, expressions in the typography. But what more important for us to teach is to how to assess those outputs and make it into their own knowledge is more important in how we can assess, I think.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for your presentations and this conversation. We had 20 minutes. We went over a tiny, tiny bit, and it's time to have all the speakers come back and have a full conversation together.
Thank you. Yes, everyone, as people are filing back into the room, we are at our closing panel. So let's see, we're going to have everyone back in the room. And we'll begin with a few questions that we've prepared. We have a couple broad questions, as many of the ideas we've heard today connect across projects and can be explored across different perspectives, as we've been hearing for the afternoon. This is also a great time where we can continue to monitor the chat. I'm scrolling back to see if we've missed any questions. If we did unintentionally miss a question, please feel free to repost your question at the beginning of the thread so we can make sure that we see it, and we will field some more questions. So if you have any questions for any speaker directly, please ask that. If you have broad questions that you're just open to any or more than one person to respond to, that would be great too. And I'll give Dina the floor again. That was your little break, Dina.
Okay. I would like to open with something I think about often, and that requires some honesty. Several of the projects we've heard today are doing important work, but I do want to ask, to what extent can design meaningfully play a role here, and where does that role actually end? I would like to ask you to resist perhaps the easy answer that design is everywhere and belongs everywhere, because that answer protects the field without interrogating it. Education, gender studies, humanitarian studies, social work, these disciplines have spent decades and decades building methodologies, also methodological rigor, ethics frameworks, and accountability structures for working with exactly these communities and questions interactions, design largely doesn't have those things yet. So I'm not asking whether design can touch these topics. I'm asking, where does design's contribution actually stop? And what happens in the space beyond that edge, sorry, who is responsible, who is accountable, and are we honest enough about those limits in how we frame and present our work? Tough question.
I can start, but also I think I have it easy because I'm not talking about my work, I'm talking about other people's work. And just from the way that these organizers and artists were writing about the periodicals that they were producing, the challenges that came with it, I think they were very aware of what they could do and what they couldn't do. And they were willing to just acknowledge that, which I think was great. But also the periodicals are great. I just have to say that it's kind of just like reading someone else's journal because they have no filters and they just sort of complain about things to their audience, even including things like, we're doing this for you, why don't you come help us? So I think in reading that, I've become a little bit more aware of the fact that these people, because their intention was very much tied between like organizing and activism, like they weren't just sort of making things or having them sort of like be dissemination or for having them be visible to other people, but it's directly to their audience. They had a very clear reason for making these things. I think they were willing to acknowledge when making something was not going to work and just like to pivot to something else, which was illuminating to encounter.
Thank you, Shreyas.
For me, sorry. Do you want to go ahead, Cindy? For me, I think two things. One is when I was working on my thesis, I looked a lot into like design facilitation and how the role of the designer has kind of shifted from the one that designs pretty things or like the one that comes in with a solution to more of like a facilitator that brings together different stakeholders. And I think that is something that designers are inherently trained to do because we're constantly collaborating and constantly working with different clients and different stakeholders. And so I think that is a very important role that design can play in addressing these bigger challenges that maybe it's hard to find like where design stands. And another thread. I forgot what my second thing was gonna be, so I'm gonna leave it at that.
If anyone wants to answer this, we can also move on to another question.
I just brief thoughts related to design in terms of its position with climate resilience. I think design traditionally exists like we exist within in the US, a capitalist extractive structure. And design it's extractive, right? We're making things, we're using things, we're building things. And I think it's important to kind of constantly question our role as designers and kind of, push those boundaries for where we can do to do good, right? Hannah, you've explored how you can design for good. But in terms of like where does design's contribution stop? I feel like the systems that are currently in place are what is holding a lot of this back. And so that's kind of like for me, for my research and my work, that's where things start to get really murky and how do you enact change when we're existing within this system and when we're training our students to get jobs and be a part of this system themselves, which they need to do because they need to graduate and they need to earn an income. And so I feel like there's a lot of just like opposing forces, right? We want to do good, but the system just isn't quite there yet. Yeah, that's it. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Cindy. That was a really critical addition that you had there. Um, I do see a question here for Cindy, since you're last here. That was a nice segue. I would love to hear more about the illustrations in Shift Deck. Could you speak to what role they play in your pedagogical tool? This question was from Shreyas.
Sure. Thank you, Shreya. So I went into like brief detail on this in the longer presentation. But I created an illustration for each mindset to kind of anchor it in to kind of anchor it in context, in nature, and kind of help like more fully explain what the mindset is about. And so the illustration style is based on like I looked at ancient art, ancient cave paintings. The Nazca lines of Peru were a big inspiration as well. Um, and I wanted everything to be very grid based. So all of my illustrations are very gridded to kind of speak to design systems and to systems change. And I wish I could give you more detail into how I decided to use biological strategies from asknature.org and the Biomimicry Institute. It came to me in like a flash. But I think that this speaks to Niharika's work as well in relationships. Like I was very much embedded in this space and studying all of these different aspects of climate resilience. And so linking these mindsets to the way these mindsets are represented in nature was just a really nice connection.
Thank you,
So
Cindy.
that's the purpose that they serve. Mhm.
I have a last question for everyone since we have only a few minutes left. Each of you ended your presentation with something open, a question, a call for action, a next step, an uncertainty. To close, what's the one thing you're most uncertain about in your own work right now, the thing you don't know yet how to answer?
I feel like all I have are questions
Yay!
at the end of my, because I mean, there's so many unknowns with mine. It's, and that's like that happens with archival work is that you can't expect completeness. You can't expect all of the answers. And I'm learning how to navigate that. But also it's sort of like how do I write about this or engage with this, knowing that there are questions I will just probably never have answers to? And how do I navigate creating scholarship about that or just engaging with this research with those just like gaping holes that'll just never get resolved? Right? Because I don't know who made these things. There's some things have trails about where they printed them, some things don't. There's like some production information, sometimes there's no production information. It's also like material that people know to archive now. They were probably not consciously starting to archive earlier on. So there is no, like, I've not encountered a full set of any of the materials that I've been looking at yet, and I don't know if I ever will. So there's a lot of just gaps in this. So yeah, there's too many questions, and I feel like the question that I'm sort of asking myself was how do I navigate knowing that there will be no answers to these things?
I love your answer. It's bringing me even more questions, but I can't ask them. So I'll just open the floor to someone else who would like to share with us their own version.
I think measuring measuring how effective this is as a whole is a huge question for me. Because my general topic is so large and unwieldy, and there are many solutions to the climate challenge. So yeah, that's something that I grapple with.
I was gonna say almost the same thing, Sydney. Like, is this going to be effective? Like, is it impacting anyone? And also another question I have is just like, I never know where to go next. So I find when I get to that, I need to do some reading. So I have that planned for the summer, but yeah, those are my questions. They're big ones, but
I love a good list of books. Share with us that reading that you want to say, that you want to do. Jatin?
I would question where the new languages and new words would be going. Like there are many new upcoming inside jokes, like the new emoji way of talking, new slangs every day coming, where young people are like reducing, and the design is also shifting from like extremism to minimalism. Every car company is making it slap on flat designs. So I don't know, I would question how the design and typography would be going forward, and how AI would be changing all those things, because it is lot of data processing as well, because now we are in this era of consuming data so much at this, that like I am just questioning the whole situation.
Can someone please redesign the hug emoji? It is not a hug. Thank you. I think we're a little over time. Kat, what would you like us to do? Continue or celebrate the end and leave it for another session?
Yeah, what a great question. I was just reading Michael's comment
Response.
in the chat too as a comment, but I have so many questions. I'm surprised no one mentioned an AI in the question at some point, because that's something I'm always, how much, how little, no, yes, maybe. I was hoping Barami would answer the question for all of us for how to incorporate it into our curriculum, so I could write all the notes down what to do. But
That's my master thesis, so I will share.
okay, let's keep in touch. Conversation will continue. No, what I'd love to do, what we like to do at the end of the design incubation colloquiums, is just go around one more time, but really brief, and just let us know where we can find a little bit more about your research, your website, or anything, Instagram that we can follow. And if you have anything exciting coming up that we should be on the lookout, we would love to know about it. Maybe we'll just go in order of the program. So we'll start with Holly.
okay, yes. So I had those QR codes. I'll link care stories into the chat as well. So on care stories, you can read some stories. There's not many right now because I've taken some down and I'm awaiting the third cycle. And also you can follow us on Instagram. My Instagram's not popping right now, but hopefully soon I'll get some more stuff up there, and I'll put that in the chat as well. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Yes, please include any links in the chat while you're sharing out loud. So, Shreyas.
I am putting 2 links in the chat. Let me make sure I'm sending it to everyone and not just the attendees, the panelists. The first link I've just dropped in the chat is a short essay I wrote that goes more into the process of the research that I did, and the archives I actually went to for the research I presented today. And this is my website. It also has a link to my email and my Instagram in the sidebar there.
Fabulous, thank you. Nargis.
I'm currently updating my website since I just completed my second year and I still have one more year before finishing my research. I'm continuing to develop the project, so the website is evolving along with it. And I'm also trying to keep my Instagram update with new work and research progress.
Yes, please add those in the chat if you can.
Yes, of course.
I feel like I'm always redesigning my website, by the way. Hannah.
Hi. So for the next year, I'll be also be at the University of Arkansas. I'll be doing a postgrad fellowship at the school. So a little bit of research, a little bit of teaching. I will drop the links to my LinkedIn and my website. Like everybody else, they're still in the process of updating. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Cindy.
Yeah, sorry, I jumped the gun for a second there in the chat. So I am lecturing in graphic design at SJSU. I'm currently also working with New Wave, which is a research project in partnership with climate designers, and we have a bunch of events scheduled. We're working on just kind of like jumping in and preparing workshops and building like a really great climate design community. So I got my website and Instagram handle there. The next link is a link to the Shift deck, and then this is the New Wave events calendar. So if anybody's interested in learning more about climate design, you can find us there.
Fabulous. Anna and Jatine and any other folks that are here.
Yeah, I have messaged everything in the chat with all the contacts and website and QR code, Google Drive link and everything.
Fabulous. That's great. What a great tool
much.
resource you shared too. I checked it out before the colloquium. It's really got a lot of great stuff.
I'd just like to add, Aisha and Jatin and Unica, they are all 2026 graduates of our MFA program and brilliant, talented designers, instructors, and colleagues who would make excellent professors of design if anyone is looking for some new faculty. Cannot recommend them highly enough. I'm sure they're going to go on to do great things. So, and I'll just be here at RIT teaching visual communication design and working on my book cover client work.
That's great. Thank you. Niharika.
Hello. So I'm just gonna drop my details in the chat. Because of this new intervention into education, my thesis website is currently being updated. But you'll find all the information over there. And currently, I'm also going to present at the AIGA DEC conference next month in Ohio, but it's not going to be about this. It is going to be about my design writing that I was doing in collaboration with my professor. So if you're interested in design history and design history research, I would love to see you there, and please keep in touch.
That's great. Thank you. And Borami, how about you?
Oh, yes. I'll share what I've done for my academic work, and I will soon update my MFA thesis as I graduate. And I'm sharing my LinkedIn too because I'm looking for job faculty in communication design and UX UI design as I'm relocating to New York this summer. So if anybody can recommend me, I will really appreciate it, or connect me. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and I think, Barami, you are recently accepted a research fellowship with Design Incubation as well, right? But I hope it's okay that I said that out loud. I think so. We're very excited. I know Dan's excited you'll be in New York. So, well, thank you so much, everyone. I believe we went around to everybody. Yes, please holler at me if I missed anyone. This has been just a wonderful event. Thank you all so much to our speakers. Thank you so much, Dina, for being our moderator today and participating with Design Incubation. The conversations, the questions were all just so wonderful. Thank you, everyone, our attendees, for coming today. This has just been a really great event for the end of the week. Just quick reminders, I'll be really brief, but I'll reiterate what Dan said in the beginning of the session. We have 2 upcoming colloquia this 2027, spring 2027. So you'll see calls open now and through 2026 for CAA, which is in New York, 2027. The call deadline for abstracts will be end of August. And then the design incubation that will be hosted at University of Connecticut. Call for abstracts should open soon for that as well. But the deadline for that will likely be more like mid-October. So you have a little bit more time to prepare any work to submit for that. Both of these colloquia are in person. Another couple of announcements is and thanks is that we can't do this work without our peer reviewers. All the work that you've seen today, the presentations, is all double-blind peer reviewed. And so much work goes into the peer review process. One of the things I really love about this organization is that every submission receives peer review, regardless of whether the work has been accepted to be presented at a colloquium. So this is a really wonderful, I think, thing for our design community that helps support people working on research and trying to elevate our research in the field. If you're interested in being a peer reviewer, you can reach out to my email or Dan Wong's as well. We're always open to hearing from new folks who might want to be interested in peer reviewing. And then if you do participate in a design incubation event, you are often, we reach out to you to see if you're interested in peer review of a future event. And other than that, I'll just drop the link into the website page on design incubation. I'm going to put that in the chat here. If you want to check out any of the work that was presented here today and re-watch any of the content that you've seen today, our presenters have all prepared video presentations that are published on the website. So you can check out their abstracts and their video presentations again if you go directly to the Design Incubation website. So that's all I have for today. Thank you again, everyone. This has been a joy, and I hope you all have a wonderful Friday and wonderful weekend.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for your presentations again. Continue to work.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.